What's up, y'all? Welcome to another edition of Making Magic. And I'm going to do something very, very unlike me, which is talk about me, which is like something that I don't genuinely love doing. But I don't know, I just felt compelled to just share with you guys, what's going on with me, what's going on, like what is mixtape even? I think most of the people that watch this know me to a certain degree and know some of my backstory. Maybe all of you guys don't, I won't assume that. So I just felt, let me just share a little, enjoy my cup of tea. Actually, this is not tea that I'm drinking. I am drinking hot water and lemon because I feel very compelled to just like cleanse my system because with all these like functions, these events that are starting to happen, the world is reopening kind of in full effect. I've been drinking and I don't know, no shade to drinking, but my body is like, girl, you gotta like, you know, we're not doing that anymore. Like that was like pre-pandemic April where she was like, tossing back the champagne, which I love, but I don't know, my body's like, okay, just take it easy. So I'm drinking hot water and lemon just to like cleanse and, get recentered. So anyway, y'all, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about what mixtape is about, what all these sessions that I've been dropping, what they've been about, and yeah. So where do I begin? So some of you watching this may know that I used to do PR for a really long time, or it feels long to me. And I don't mean that like in a negative way, it was like a beautiful, beautiful ride. But some of you may not know like how the PR thing even started with me. So I started PR, actually my first PR gig, or yeah, I'll say gig, was an internship. And I was working at Epic Records, their media relations department at the time. And I was still in school, still in undergrad. I went to UVA. And yeah, PR was never something that I thought I would do. I was actually more interested in writing. But through a friend of my sister's, she let me know about, or no, maybe actually it was my sister directly, I think. She had reached out to someone that she knew at Epic Records to hook me up with this internship, which was actually great because even though, PR was not something that I was savvy to, and thinking that I would do ultimately, the fact that it was at a record label was so amazing because music always spoke to my heart. So I interned there. When did I intern there? So it was like maybe my second year in college and my third year in college, I want to say. And then I graduated and then I went to Mexico City because I wanted to have the experience of living outside of the US. Even while I was in school, I wanted that experience, but I don't know, I just had too many things going on. So it didn't work out. But my last year in college before I graduated, I had this professor who was like super passionate about teaching ESL. Actually the class that I took, oddly enough, was specifically about teaching ESL and how you break into that industry. And I was like, oh, this is dope. I want to learn more. Like, how cool is it to be able to travel and also, get paid while you're doing it? So I did some research, found a program, and ended up in Mexico City. So I was teaching ESL to kids and adults, which was interesting. And I was doing that, by day, obviously. And then by night, I was like all up in the mix of Mexico City nightlife, just living my best life. Like I think, even though I'd been interning in New York before that, I had the big city experience, but it wasn't quite like this. Cause I think, like when I was in New York interning, I was with my sister. Shout out to Kenya. So I couldn't fully let loose because I was like living with her, I'm like little sis, and I don't know, I just felt kind of weird about it. But in Mexico City, like I was fully free to just live. And yeah, it really spoke to me. And I really thought like, man, I want to come back and like live here, and really just, I don't know, spend some time there, more than the 5 months that I had spent, just doing the ESL gig. So when I came back to the US after like my ESL program, well, actually, I can't even say that the program ended. I ended in a sense because I was like, I had like no money after a while. I was like, okay, this is like, I have to go back to Virginia to my parents. So anyway, came back to my parents, and I was just really obsessed with thinking about, how do I get back to Mexico City? So I thought, I'm not sure how this thought came into my head, but I was like, oh, why don't I teach myself how to DJ? And then I'll go back and I will teach ESL, and then I will DJ as well. And then also that'll give me, more income so I could stay. And so I was scouring eBay, y'all, and found this equipment, purchased it, was so hyped, and just waiting for this equipment to arrive so I could just like dig in and just, teach myself how to DJ, whatever. So it took me a couple of days to realize I was not getting this equipment, and I had gotten scammed by like some eBay seller that made a living out of scamming people. A mess. So needless to say, after dropping coin on that equipment that I never got, I didn't like, that was my little money. I didn't really have much money. It's like I just graduated. So I was like, all right, I guess that plan is not, that's not what this is going to give. I'm not going back to Mexico City. So I was like, all right, well, I'll go to New York, which ultimately I did want to end up in New York. Like that spoke to me. So I decided, okay, let's just go back to that concept. And then I moved in with my sister, and then I ended up getting, I did like a couple of like temp positions and stuff, but then ultimately I ended up through, having like past experience of working in a PR department at a record label, I ended up having a full-time, getting hired to do PR full-time at the New York Historical Society, which was another like unlikely thing. But, it's just the power of people knowing people, and just like, you got to get in where you fit in, basically, especially during then. Like it just, that time it was particularly hard to find jobs. So, which I still think that that's the case. I think that that is always the case. It's always hard when you just got out of school, or anywhere, you don't even have to go to school. Just finding a job, period, can be tricky, So it's like when you are presented the opportunity to interview, and the likelihood of you getting it is high, you leap and you take it. So that's what I did. And so I was working in the PR department of New York Historical Society for about 2 years. But all the while, the idea of DJing just would not go away. So I ended up going to a physical store and buying equipment. And I would practice, toy around with that equipment like every day, just like DIY, teaching myself how to beat match, and, just getting to know the BPMs of it, just knowing my music inside and out, like just really just getting to the root of my music and just playing, practicing like the equipment, it's an instrument in a sense. So finally, after like all that practicing, and I just started to get like some semblance of a nerve to play out in public, I ended up getting like an unpaid gig at this lounge downtown, which is so crazy that they're still open, called La Linea in the Lower East Side. And so I was doing that and working at the New York Historical Society. I was like, that gig was maybe every Sunday or every other Sunday. So yes, so fast forward, at the New York Historical Society, it's like year 2, and I'm ready for a new adventure. I was like, okay, this has been a great foundational experience, but I gotta switch it up, like I was getting, I don't know, getting kind of just restless. So I had heard about a position at, well, at the time it was called just PS1, now, known as MoMA PS1. Heard about a position at PS1 through, again, I think it was like somehow through like my sister and like a friend of hers. He's like, like that network kind of thing. So I applied and then they hit me back and I went in to be interviewed by this woman who was running the PR department. She was the director of communications there, Ing Ru Chin. Shout out to Ing. Yeah, and we hit it off and she ended up offering me the position, which was PR associate. So, like most people, when you leave one job and you're about to enter the new job, I wanted to like have some time off. So, my start date, I think it was like maybe a week or two in between, leaving my job at New York Historical Society. So decided to go to Virginia with my parents and yeah, just stay there, reset, just chill out and just kind of just do nothing, until my start date. So one day I was checking my email just kind of randomly. I saw a note from Ing and I opened it and it was like a long message. And I was like, oh God, like what is this woman trying to break to me? Because usually it's like when you open your email and you see all that word count, I don't know, it always makes me nervous. So I'm reading it and reading it. And then I realized like she's basically trying to break it to me. So she got a job offer from an institution that she just couldn't refuse. It was just like a great opportunity. And basically, she was trying to prepare me for the fact that not only would I be absorbing the responsibilities of the PR associate that I was replacing, that I would likely be absorbing her responsibilities too, as like PR director, because essentially no one was going to be in the PR department except for me, because now she was leaving too. And she just knew the deal. And especially at that time with PS1, like budgets were so lean. I mean, that's the story with all our organizations, I feel, but especially then, and they weren't intertwined. They weren't technically like a part of MoMA in the way that they are part of MoMA now. So just like it was just a different landscape financially. So anyway, she was just preparing me for the fact that they probably weren't going to hire, an official director of communications and it was just going to be me. So I was like, oh my God, like so freaked out. I was so shook. So fast forward again, I am like the PR department at PS1 and yeah, it was like boot camp for me. It was art world PR boot camp because I'd never worked in the art world before and PR was still like pretty new to me, and like to be catapulted in a position where it's like so public facing and I'm like the one, corresponding with all these like really high profile journalists and, arranging these interviews like with these like ranging in career, artists, which again was like so new to me because that was not my background, was just like, it was a lot. But then, I quickly, I mean, I don't know how quick actually, so I won't say quickly, but at some point I realized, wow, this is like such a blessing, in disguise, or maybe eventually it wasn't in disguise because I realized, this predicament of connecting with people directly was so beautiful, it was such a rare thing, to just at that young age, like not, I don't know, like at that point, I had been out of college. This was like 2007. And I had just, I mean, a couple of years before that had graduated. So anyway, yeah, it was all like happening like so fast. And yeah, in hindsight, that was like the foundation for so many things to come. And all the while, my DJ spirit really took off because PS1, like not only were they doing presenting contemporary art, they were also engaging in the music world as well, performing world, by way of the warm-up music series, which most of you guys know happens in the summer. And so I was really immersed with like all these like emerging and like star DJs, and it was just such like the perfect storm for me. So it just kept my DJ passion just going. So fast forward, I was at PS1 for 4 years, a little over 4 years, doing that and also DJing on the side. And that started to kind of take off a bit. Like the DJing, I was starting to play out a little bit more. And then as I was starting to get that itch of okay, what's next? In terms of my career, I got the opportunity to consult, which is not something that I wouldn't say ever, but it wasn't something that I was thinking of at the time. So I ended up taking a leap to take on a PR consulting position with the gallery for a year, which gave me peace of mind to break free from what I was used to. So yeah, so that was very stressful and very scary and a lot of hard work. And yeah, fast forward again, 10 years into it, I was doing that. I had a PR firm and I was working with this really amazingly, beautifully diverse group of clients that, I wouldn't have expected that 10 years before that. And all the while, I was DJing more and more and more. And yeah, at the time, really loving and appreciating that balance and just reveling in the community that I was becoming more and more a part of, which in that community, which I became a part of, is really, really the root of what mixtape is. So now I'm going to transition into kind of now. So after 10 years of having my PR firm, Sparkplug PR, I was starting, or maybe 9 years, I say, year 8 and 9, I started feeling just that itch again of okay, April, it's time for a new adventure. And, it's hard. It's hard to listen to that internal voice that's saying, girl, okay, it's time for something new. When the thing that you're doing, your day job, so to speak, is very lucrative and successful on paper. So, but I just knew deep, deep down inside that it was time for me to shift. And I made space for that shift right before the pandemic. So the end of 2019. And that's really how mixtape evolved. And I just really started to just think about what really makes me happy? What really fuels my fire? And how do I turn it into a business? And so the answer to that question was kind of a duh girl moment. Okay, duh, DJing lights your fire, playing music and but it's not just the DJing. It's gathering the community together to celebrate each other and then having the privilege to play music for that celebration and help kind of craft what that celebration feels like. So I was okay, that's the business. That's the next phase. And so I phased out Sparkplug PR and then put my focus on mixtape, which is still unfolding. So what you guys have been witnessing, these virtual sessions, that was sort of me stepping up to the challenge of a pandemic. Because, the original concept of mixtape was to do IRL happenings, which is kind of something that I was involved with all along. But it's, when you're doing something that you love and it's just fun, a lot of times you don't think that that's something that you can really focus in on. And that can be your thing, your career, your work passion, so to speak. But yeah, the pandemic hit. So the opportunity to do those IRL happenings that, was put on hold. So I thought, okay, well, how do I step up to the challenge of like bringing that essence of joy, which is really the root of it for me. It's bringing that essence of joy um, to the fore with my community. And so, I had to think like, what does that look like virtually? And then that's how Mix and Kiki evolved. And then also Mix It Up. I didn't really have too many Mix It Up sessions because Mix It Up was a version of Mix and Kiki, but it added like food into the mix, and just, I don't know, me and food and like preparing things. That was like a little stressful. So, it was mainly Mix and Kiki, me having a key and a cocktail with like beautiful creatives who I love. And some of them I didn't know personally until doing those sessions with, but it's just like, again, just bringing home that, again, that essence of joy for a community of primarily Black and Brown creatives that I just so constantly inspired by. So now I've been doing, well, this is the second Making Magic session, and really Making Magic. It's like mixing Kiki, but it doesn't, I'm not having a cocktail, as you can see, because I told y'all I need to be cleansing. But really the root of Making Magic for me, like the last one that I did with the lovely photographer Deborah Jack, if any of you guys saw that, we ended up talking about spirituality. Like we ended up throwing that into the mix, and not in like a heavy way. And I'm someone who, I'm very critical of organized religion. I have like, I won't say trauma, but I have my issues with organized religion. So to even use the word spirituality, I was a little like nervous about using that word, but that's what I connect to. It is like spiritual things, and not so much like the organ. And no shade. It's like if you, you are tied to a religion like that works for you, and that's beautiful. But for me, it's more about spirituality. And I just felt compelled to just open up that conversation too, and just how that can bring you joy, and how like your connection to like your version of spirituality as a creative can just bring out so many possibilities. So yeah, so that's the current phase of Mixtape. There's some things unfolding soon, I hope, revisiting that original concept of doing IRL happenings. But yeah, I just felt well, I won't just say the need. I felt compelled. That's a better word. I felt compelled to share this with you guys and just talk and be open. So yeah, that's my spirituality, the joy, the essence of the joy, in relation to this community that I'm a part of. And thank you guys for being a witness, being a participant, and all of it. And I'm excited for, the near future timing of big news ahead, to share with you. So anyway, until next time, you guys, cheers, and I will see you soon.